Kizuna India-Japan Study Forum, about which Dr. Ashok Jain, President of MOSAI, will apprise you shortly. On behalf of MOSAI and my own, I extend a very warm welcome to His Excellency Kunihiko Kawazu, Deputy Chief of Mission Embassy of Japan. I wish to express my gratitude to him for sparing time to grace the occasion despite his busy schedule. I welcome our dynamic scholar diplomat, Ambassador Deepa Gopalan Wadhwa, President India-Japan Friendship Forum. We are indeed very grateful to her for her guidance and encouragement in all our endeavors related to promoting India-Japan relations. It is difficult to envisage any activity pertaining to Japanese studies in India without the support of the Japan Foundation. I thank and welcome Mr. Koji Sato, Director General of the Japan Foundation, for being with us on this very important occasion. A very hearty welcome to the 6 star speakers of the day, 3 eminent paper presenters, Professor João Paulo Costa from Lisbon, Professor Masumi Igrashi from Okayama, and Mr. Mukund Kirsur from Bangalore, and 3 equally eminent discussants, Professor Elena Wu-Than from Brittany, France. She would be joining us on screen. Professor Rajiv Lochan from New Delhi, and Dr. Ananta Rahman from Bangalore. He would also be joining us on the screen. Last but not the least, I welcome the audience, both online and offline, for making the event vibrant and lively. It is indeed heartening to note their interest in the history of India-Japan cultural interactions. Thank you all for sparing your precious time to attend this inaugural event. With these words, I request Dr. Ashok Jain, President of MOSAI, to brief the audience about Kizuna India-Japan Study Forum. Dr. Ashok Jain, please. Thank you.
With your permission, Ambassador Wadhwa and Professor Sushilaji, may we have a minute of silence? Today is Prime Minister Abe's funeral in Japan. We would like to just pay our respects by observing a minute of silence. Thank you. Thank you. Well, friends, I would like to share with you the raison d'etre why we have set up this forum. I would like to fall back upon a very well thought out, beautifully worded formulation on the website of Gaimusho, Japan Foreign Affairs Ministry. And I quote, Indian culture filtered through Buddhism had a great impact on Japanese culture. Indian culture filtered through Buddhism had a great impact on Japanese culture and is the source of feeling of closeness of Japanese to India. Now, this is fascinating. The interaction with Buddhism was 8th century. And Gaimusho says, and when Gaimusho says, I know that the diplomats feel the pulse of two nations and have the facility of expressing it very concisely. Now, it's for the scholars, therefore, to go deep into this statement. How come an impact created in 8th century is still perceived as a source of closeness amongst Indians? And in a nutshell, this is what the Kizuna India-Japan Study Forum wishes to explore. The entire history. And clearly, the statement says that it's not Buddhism per se, it's the culture that filtered through. And therefore, our query is in this forum, what shape did the culture transform with the transformation of the society? Initially, yes, it was more in terms of the philosophical and spiritual context. But as society changes, the culture manifests in different forms. And I'm reminded of, in this context, Moto Ori Norinaga. That was the first response when the Western culture, foreign culture, started impacting the Japanese culture. And it was this great thinker who once again very succinctly, Japanese success and minimization is something unique. Put in beautiful few words, the crux of Japanese culture, mono no aware. Beautiful. Empathy, closeness to things. And that's where the culture in products becomes a reality. Start looking at culture in products. And this is where for centuries, the exchange between the products, Indian and Japanese, and what were those products? This is the time before Industrial Revolution. So these were crafted products, handloom, craft products, pottery. These are all entirely human embodied, culture embodied products. For centuries, it's through these exchange of products that the feeling of closeness in transformed form kept being nurtured, nourishment was available, and it flourished, the closeness flourished. Once again, when the transformation takes place, technology came from abroad. And once again, the concept of Wakor Yosai. Beautiful. Western technology with Japanese ethos. Therefore, it seems that even when technology came to Japan, it had very consciously for the Japanese something culture, some human element in it, the ethos. And therefore, when we say that there will be skilling, there will be technology from Japan and so on, I think it's that ethos which is equally important, because that ethos is the closeness, the nurturing of closeness, the nourishment to closeness would come from capturing that ethos behind products, behind technology. And I think this is extremely important because it's a history, long history. I'm just giving you a few examples of handicrafts and so on. But once the product started reaching Japan, and here comes our friend from Portugal, it's they who started this connecting India to Japan through shipping routes via East Asia, Southeast Asia. And now we talk about Southeast Asia, the network, and it's the cultural network that is there, but for us to explore. So what I'm saying is that I started off by quoting from Guy Motion, by saying that people who are seeped into constituting bilateral relations, the so-called diplomats, they give us lead. And it's for the scholars to now go deep into those things. What better combination could we have? Diplomats, senior people, scholars, artists. The stage is set. Now, Musai only creates the stage, but the performance are there. The overall drama scenario is with us. Please perform. We have already started, in a sense, taking small steps. Today is the inauguration. We have planned monthly lectures online, physical, every month. And I'm told by Sushila ji, they were already lined up monthly lectures till April?
Yes.
Till April. Every month till April. In February, there is a big conference, webinar planned with 20 speakers already confirmed. So I think the stage is set. Performance has started performing. The motive behind this, right there. Ambassador Deepa Vajan, Sushila ji, and Igrashi-san. These three have been talking to each other, exchanging emails and so on. What name should be given and so on. And here we are on the inaugural day. Thank you so much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ashok Jain, for your very encouraging remarks. We'll continue it. Now I request Ambassador Deepa Gopalan Vadwa to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Sushila ji. If you don't mind, I'll sit here and speak. Professor Sushila Narasimhan, Dr. Ashok Jain, His Excellency, DCM of the Japanese Embassy, Kuniko Kawazu-san, Mr. Koji Sato of the Japan Foundation, all the speakers today who are here, who made this long journey to be here, discussants, those online, ladies and gentlemen who are joining us from different parts of the world. We heard just now a talk by, the inaugural remarks by Dr. Jain. And I think, I don't know, it probably so evidently came from the heart. I have never seen, people so dedicated to the cause of India-Japan relations as Mosai. And that just shows when governments invest in people and send scholars to each other's countries. This is actually an investment that lasts through life. And therefore, we have, Mosai has been formed by the Mumbusho scholars, but they have continued at a time when, relations weren't what it was today. Relations today are really going through their best phase ever between our two countries. And if you look at political, security, economic, and, in every areas. But I think while we do talk about people-to-people relations, it is really something that requires much more attention than is given. And for that, we need really a much deeper understanding and knowledge of each other. My own experience when I went to Japan, I had lived in China, I knew Southeast Asia well. When I went to Japan, it was a revelation for me, the connections with India. I mean, it was very exciting to find these connections, but I was also aware that how little we knew about it. China connections we knew, Southeast Asia, of course, well documented. And ever since I was there, I really wanted this to be an area of focus where we could perhaps come out with some publications which would stay, which would actually be able to record these connections that are there, of course, starting from the 8th century, but through history. And this is really what Mosa has been able to do, I think, and particularly in this year, which is the 70th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations. The other day I was at an event and Kawazu-san was saying they've already been about 200 events to commemorate the 70th anniversary. There's so much actually to celebrate in our relationship. But I think this audience here, thank you so much for being here. This is really, really special. And to think already, it was an idea. And then you have this Kizuna study group, which is, come into being. We just heard that this conference, the kind of response it's got, and that the lectures already been settled till April. I'm sure that we'll be able to reach out to a larger audience. I think it's really important. And at the end of it, that we can come out with something. For at least 1400 years, India and Japan have been linked through spiritual affinity and strong cultural and civilizational ties, which have shaped and reshaped by the movement of people and goods and ideas via a variety of sea and land routes that traversed the expanse of Asia, resulting in intermingling of cultures, races, language, religion, and trading goods. We do have, a record, perhaps, as we spoke about, around the 8th to maybe the 8th, 9th century. And then you have some periods in between of quiet when there is not enough information that's available. And this is, I think, an area that requires attention. Despite colonial disruptions and post-colonial disconnects created by the West, approximately 16th to the 20th centuries, in these age-old connectivities, the core civilizations have retained their regional aesthetic identity, but at the same time enriching and being enriched by inter-Asian and East-West cross-cultural encounters. While the historical perspectives of many processes have been traced and studied, there still remain many gaps and missing links which need further research. It is important to promote discussion among an international group of scholars to examine these relationships, to better understand the relationship between India and Japan and the impact Asian transit routes, especially Southeast Asia, have had upon this exchange. I was associated with the international conference, which was held in November 2018. And that was really my introduction to these wonderful people of Mosai, so dedicated and so giving in what they do. And it was called Unearthing Lesser Known Aspects of India-Japan Historical and Cultural Interactions. They released a book which they put together of the talks. It was a wonderful conference over a couple of days. And I would really recommend that book. I don't know whether it's available for people. Online and free. And I really think that's a huge, wonderful asset for anybody who wants to be able to read them. I'm also co-chair of the advisory committee of the planned webinar that Ashokji just spoke about, Discovering India-Japan Civilizational Ties and Southeast Asia Connectivities. The webinar will examine the interconnectivity of the whole of Asia, that is South Asia, East Asia, Southeast Asia, Central Asia, direct or indirect by land or by sea. Expanding the geographic confines of the discussion will help to highlight missing links of India-Japan cultural and historical connections. The Indian Ocean Maritime Network, especially between India and Japan, was replete with flows and connections that through multidisciplinary tools can enrich our understanding. We talk about the Indo-Pacific today, but I think this Indo-Pacific was there a long time ago. And in fact, one of the first who spoke about this continuum between the two oceans was perhaps the Portuguese, because they were able to traverse the oceans between the two countries. Some of the topics of the February webinar which will cover are, and papers have been sought for, and I think we've got a response, but they will not be limited to, but these are some of the subjects. Early Buddhist links. While Japanese and Chinese sources gave valuable information about the activities of Bodhisena in Japan, very little is known about who he was, who accompanied him to Japan. In fact, which is a route he took, because you have different views of the routes that he took. And I come from the South myself. So there's also, I think, quite a question about his origins, that people who say he came from Kanjipuram, but there are, I think, other versions also from where he originated. So what is the role of overseas monks in popularizing Indian and Southeast Asian culture, rituals, and so on in 8th century Japan? I mean, how was this easy acceptance of an Indian who came across? I've always wondered, and we talk about Emperor Shomu, but the kind of respect that was given to him in that short period of time, it's something quite amazing when you think of it. And I think I began actually my stay, I would say my pilgrimage in Japan with Nara, because I think that is where most Indians really should start to realize the connection. The other subject that we want to look at in this conference is Trans-Regional Maritime Highway. Even before the opening of direct European voyages to Asia, there existed a vibrant seaborne mobility by migrants, merchants, warriors, cultural activists, religious preachers through the Indian Ocean. India's centrality in this route and the demand for Indian goods, as we know, textiles, batik, pepper, played a vital role in the circulation of information and inter-Asian cross-cultural encounters. We would also like to talk about the centers that encourage this trade, Asian port cities, and local and other foreign cultural interactions, which in a way catalyze this connect between Japan and India. We do know that there was a craze for Chinese and Japanese artifacts, but not only in Europe but also in the Mughal period. So there is so much to be studied between the two countries. I myself was quite amazed before I went. It was a chance trip. I'd gone to Jodhpur, and I went to a particular shop that has some so-called antiques. And while I was in the basement trying to look at very dusty things, I found a huge ceramic plate of what looked like Vishnu and Lakshmi. And it was so different. So I picked it up, and it wasn't expensive at all. And I took it at that point of time. No, I was not going to Japan. I think I was going to some other posting. And then finally, this plate came with me, landed up in Japan. And when I reached there, I realized it was Japanese. That at the early 20th century, that these majolica tiles, in fact, had come, and that you could find them in most well-to-do Indian households in the puja rooms of Indian gods. And what I have is really, really special. The fact that it sort of was perhaps, pointing me in the direction of Japan. So there are connections like this. Later, I heard that this particular, that Indians adopting and opting for majolica ties made in Japan versus what the British had was in a way us protesting, the British colonialism by saying that there was an Asian source. So there's so much of history that really needs to be studied. So there are various things that we can, look at. We know architecture, food, landscapes, the music, poetry, and so on. But I do hope that we will in the talks that are going to come and in the conference that is going to be held in February, look at these areas. And I do hope more people will join. And that this will see really, it's very important to me that we are able to in some way put it down in a publication that will stay, that will remain, that will not stay just in the realm of talks that we have. But thank you very much for being present here, and thank you for your efforts. I go back to this because it's really important, Sushila ji and Ashok ji. I know how much work has gone into this. Thank you very much for the support of the Japan Foundation and of the embassy, and we really count on the support. What am I doing here? I must say that of the various aspects of India-Japan relations, which fascinated me, and it's such an important relationship, this is what perhaps I love the most. So which is why I'm here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Wadhwa, for highlighting various areas and for your information. We have a speaker for our February conference who is speaking on majolica tiles, which were inspired by Raja Ravi Verma's paintings. So now may I request His Excellency Kunihiko Kawazu to say a few words.
Dr. Ashok Jain, President of MOSAI, Professor Sushila Narushman Sensei, Forum Advisory Board Member and Governor, Ambassador Deepa Gopalan Vadova Taishi, President of India-Japan Friendship Forum, Mr. Koji Sato-san, Director General of the Japan Foundation, New Delhi, distinguished scholars, artists, and participants, ladies and gentlemen. Namaskar, konnichiwa, good afternoon, good evening, good morning to all over the world. First of all, I would express my sincere thanks to be a part of this inaugural seminar of the India-Japan Study Forum. I feel very much honored. And today, there are a bunch of researchers, scholars, and experts active all over the world are participating in this precious seminar. My thanks go to MOSAI, of course, the host of this forum, and the president of MOSAI, Mr. Ashok Jain. And to Jain-san, thank you very much for proposing the minute of silence for our great statesman, former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, and also mentioning the Mono no Aware and Wakon Yosai, which I have not heard in India so far, but I hope that I could hear such very high-end, difficult Japanese words and terminology in India, which will be a very deep evidence for the mutual understanding. MOSAI has been playing an instrumental role as a secretariat for Japan Alumni Association, and also very much active in the various activities like the Japanese education and Japan research like this. Another good example is the All India Japanese Language Speech Contest. The most recent one, the 33rd one, was held quite recently, and I participated in this contest too. I am one of the strongest believers of the MOSAI's activities, which will lead to the better and enhanced bilateral relations between India and Japan. My thanks go to the Ambassador Wadwa too. You are always helping us, helping the Embassy of Japan, as well as the Indo-Japan relations in general. You are kindly heading this important framework in India-Japan Friendship Forum, IJFF. IJFF implemented 2 webinars so far in this important anniversary year. The first one was the future of digitalization in India and Japan. The second is called India-Japan Cooperation for Women Empowerment, focus on Technical Intern Training Program, TITP, and Specified Skilled Workers, SSWs. We appreciate such the webinars a lot. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, like the Mr. Jain, President Jain mentioned, the both countries, India and Japan, we have been nurturing our strong cultural bond, starting from the Buddhism exchange in the ancient era. I am very glad to hear that the Ambassador Vadua mentioned Nara as a place, the travel destination for Indians. I would like to associate myself with Ambassador very much. In this context, I would like to recommend our Japanese people to visit the Ajanta and Ellora, which I visited quite recently, 2 weeks ago. The painting in the cave #1 in Ajanta. This is very, very important. This painting reminds me of the Horyuji temple in Nara. This is a very clear evidence how close we were through the Buddhism in the old times. And now, looking at our bilateral relations, the economy is good, security is also good, but the people-to-people exchanges, the cultural exchanges, I believe that we have still the big space of improvement, like Ambassador Vadua foreshadowed in her speech. Both leaders recognize this point. The India and Japan have had twice the leaders meeting in this year. The first one was the March and the second one was May. Both leaders, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and our Prime Minister Kishida, agreed upon the necessity to further advance the people-to-people exchanges as well as the cultural exchanges in this important anniversary year. Also, this month, September, Foreign Minister Jai Shankar paid a visit to Japan, and he had a strategic dialogue with his counterpart, our Foreign Minister Hayashi, and they also shared the recognition that this area, people-to-people exchange and cultural exchange, should be further promoted, including the better utilization of the IT human resources of India, also the specialized skilled workers of India. I do believe that we are going into the, so to say, post-corona era slowly. I do hope that the opportunities of the mutual understanding, opportunities of the mutual visits between two peoples will be increased in coming future. Ladies and gentlemen, in this context, I would like to reiterate that this Kizuna India-Japan Study Forum is very much timely. I just heard that the monthly lectures will be continued up until the April next year. The experts, scholars will deepen the researches for our histories and cultural exchanges, and the outcome will be compiled in a book. I do believe that this will enhance our mutual understanding. Today's first topic is the Portuguese ship in 16th century. This is what I heard. Average standard Japanese, including myself. When listening to Kurofune, we, the Japanese people, think about the military ship headed by Admiral Perry from the United States in the 19th century. But I am told that this word, Kurofune, appears on the Japanese-Portuguese dictionary, edited by the Christianity missionary to Japan in the 16th century. For the Japanese people, the fact that the Portuguese ship arrived at Tanegashima Island in the year of the 1543, and through this, the cannon was brought to Japan. This historic fact is so famous. The elementary school. This is something we learn in the elementary school. But I believe that no Japanese knows that this Portuguese ship was a giant black Portuguese carack, which was called Kurofune. And also this travel of the Portuguese Kurofune was the sort of the establishment of the sea route between Goa and Nagasaki, meaning between India and Japan. And I believe that this is really the start of the concept, free and open Indo-Pacific FOIP. Like that, it is very much important to shed a light on the under-researched aspects of the exchanges between India and Japan, and more importantly, to share such facts between two peoples. For that purpose, this forum is a very good basis for the development of our bilateral relations towards future. It is truly worthwhile. And for this important seminar, Professor Igrashi Masumi Sensei, Okayama University, kindly traveled to India and participate in this seminar. I hope that the experts, researchers, scholars in various areas will interact in this important fora, and this will contribute to the researches for our bilateral relations. In conclusion, again, I would like to express my sincere thanks to the President Jane Mosai and Ambassador Badoa, all of the researchers, scholars, experts to be a part of this important event. Dhanyawad, arigatou gozaimasu. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for your very inspiring comments and remarks. Now I invite Mr. Koji Sato to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Sushila Sensei. Dr. Ashok Jain, President of Mosai, Ambassador Badoa, DCM Mr. Kunihiko Kawazu, distinguished scholars, speakers, and guests, ladies and gentlemen. After listening to wonderful, enlightening speech by the just previous speakers. Just I know that maybe this could be just the redundancy of just what they talked brilliantly. So let me very much brief. I just want to congratulate Mosai on the launch of this wonderful Kizuna India-Japan Study Forum. おめでとうございます. Today, in a year that marks the 70th anniversary of diplomatic relations between our two countries, we are happy to observe steady development of our relations in all sectors, thanking to the strong leadership by the past and current leaders of the two countries. At the same time, it is, of course, not only the national leaders who have made our strong bonds, which now just we are enjoying. Throughout the continued interactions and exchange of many people of the countries, we have nurtured special affinity or closeness and shared values and cultures. With this in mind, I respect very much Mosai's role and activities to discuss and record the footprints of exchanges between the two countries by holding a symposium in 2018 and publishing the record of this symposium last year, which Ambassador Wadwa just mentioned or introduced. And I am very pleased that Mosai has launched a forum to discuss further the relationship between the two countries as an extension of these efforts. I occasionally open and read the record of this symposium, India-Japan Narratives, which records many little-known facts about the direct and indirect interactions between the people of the two countries and their influence on each other's society and culture. It is often said that after Bodhisena's performance at the eye-opening ceremony of Lushana Butsu, Buddha statue at Todaiji in 752, we had to wait for more than 1,000 years of almost no contact between us until the 20th century for the actual substantial contact and exchange to start. But it is not as such actually, and rich exchanges had continued through trade and other activities of people since the medieval and early modern periods. And also in the modern period, other than often referred Okakura Tagore encounter, the detail of which should be learned by many, there are lots of exchanges and collaborations between Japanese and Indians that contributed to strengthening our trust and bonds. We can learn about it and be inspired very much through this book. Intellectual dialogue on India-Japan Kizuna bond will go on through the forum. Through this forum that has been launched today, let us learn and be inspired from this history of exchange. And from this moment on, let us create a new history of friendship and partnership. I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to just all the people just who made today's launch event possible, including the IIC for just hosting this memorable seminar today in this wonderful venue. Just my thanks goes to all the distinguished speakers and scholars. And thank you very much, Jane-san, Ambassador Wadwa, Sushiraji, and all the organizers. Especially just the speakers just who traveled just all the way, hundreds or 1,000 kilometers during this COVID period. It is really, really happy moment that just finally just we could do this kind of, very normal thing that we used to do in a COVID period, pre-COVID period. So, but anyhow, thank you very much for coming all the way just to enlighten us at this seminar. So we are all so excited to learn from today's discussion about our predecessors' rich interactions, which may give us hope that we can do more in this age of globalization. So let us enjoy the historical journey today. Thank you very much. Dhanyabad.
Thank you very much, Sato-san. Now I thank all the audience and all the speakers. And now we wish to start our seminar session. And Ambassador Padwa, she will chair the seminar sessions. So, do we reduce the time? Oh,
Questions will come.
Oh.
Should I go?
So we begin from the first speaker, Professor João Paulo Costa. You will have to come to the podium, Professor Costa.
So I'll take over from here and welcome Professor João Paulo Costa. First of all, thank you so much for coming all the way here. Professor Costa is Professor of History of the History Department in Nova Lisbon, Portugal. His main interests are maritime history, construction of early modern global cities and oceanic networks. He's the coordinator of the UNESCO chair, the Ocean's Heritage. The discussant is going to be Professor Helen Bhutan, who will join us by video conferencing. She's the associate professor at the Université Institut Universitaire de France. She specializes on the study of missionaries in and around Japan in the 16th and 17th century. We're really looking forward to your talk, Professor Costa, about the first ship that linked India directly to Japan. As you see, there's a lot of feeling about the free and open Indo-Pacific nowadays. And this was, probably the first voyage of the sort. The other thing is, I think it is this event that in many ways was a connection between Japan and India because of Francis Xavier. You know, he went from Goa and then he lies there. So that's been a very special connect. But over to you. We look forward to maybe about 20 minutes of your talk. And then, of course, we will have our discussant joining us. We might just shorten the question comments because I think we're a little short of time, but over to you, sir. Thank you.
So, thank you so much.
Professor Costa, please accept this.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. So, first of all, Mr. Ambassador, I skipped the introduction because the time is short, but I'm very proud to be here. I'm very honored for the invitation. I should say the first time I came to New Delhi, it was in January 1989. It was a long time ago, but I was hosted here in the India International Center, the same place. So it's very good, very nice. It was very nice for me to come back to a kind of home I have here in New Delhi. So thank you so much. And you know, India and Japan are the two Asian countries where I've been more time and travel and visited more times, but I never expected to be invited to talk about your relations, direct relations, under my perspective of Portuguese, but I thank you for that. And I will try to respect history, and so only salute warmly my colleague Hélène Bhutan, who is going to make the comments. She was very kind to accept this challenge. Hélène, merci beaucoup pour ta gentillesse et pour ce moment en que nous serons ensemble. Well, let's go to speak about this Kurofune, the first ship which linked India directly to Japan. So first, we have to all say that in Lisbon, we have developed studies on these interactions between Portugal and Japan, and through Portugal and Japan about all what is the Asian connections that the Portuguese established in the early modern ages. And we have we published a journal for 20 years, which was called Bulletin of Portuguese Japanese Studies, full in English with summaries in Portuguese and Japanese. And I brought a collection to Japan Foundation. I hope that you may be interested here. So quickly, the connections between this is a Chinese map, but I will use in another way. This is the idea of the belt that the Republic of China proposed, but I'm looking at it as the way how Eurasia for millennia is in contact, is interactive. The Silk Roads are much bigger than that. And for sure, since very early, they also included Japan. This is an instrument, but there are others. This is from Persia, from the 17th century, 7th century Persia, but that are in Japanese museums because the Silk Roads had a maritime branch very early, and it was how Japan became also absorbed Chinese civilization, and through China, most of the Asian civilizations, such as Buddhism, in the 7th and 8th centuries. What the Portuguese did in the 16th century, at the end of the 16th century, by the inaugural voyage of Vasco da Gama, which is shown here represented in this manuscript, was to add a new path to the same Silk Roads, and that permitted that Lisbon would become, in the 16th century, a new hub of spices, porcelains, carpets, lacquers, ivories, furnitures, or jewels, as well as a point of departure of so many things. I've studied the topic you invited me to speak about today. It is more or less what I did in my master thesis for about 40 years ago. And the first thing that is very interesting, that this is the book where I wrote, the discovery of Japanese civilization by the Portuguese. I will come to the topic of discoveries. But what is interesting to know is that when the Portuguese arrived to India in 1498, they immediately hear about the China. And they start bringing porcelain to Europe, but they didn't hear about Japan. Also to say that the Portuguese never were looking for Cipango or for Catai, despite they knew about the book of Marco Polo, and there were some copies in Portugal. The Portuguese experience was experimental, so they were not looking for what tradition was saying, but what the news they were getting in Asia itself. And so the Portuguese had never heard to Japan, even when they arrived to China, to Canton in 1513. At that time, Japanese external trade was performed especially by Ryukyu people, which were called Lekyus. Lekya is the way of saying Ryukyu. And so, from 1498 to 1543, when the first Portuguese arrived to Tarigashima, there was only a description of Japan, a sole one, from a Portuguese, Tomé Pires, who lived in Malacca for 2 years after the conquest of the city by Afonso de Albuquerque, where he says quickly that the island of Japan, according to the Chinese, is bigger than the biggest of the Ryukyu Islands, and its king is much more powerful, but he and his vassals do not like to trade. He is a pagan king and vassal of the king of China. They have little relations with China because it's too far, and they have no good ships, and they are not the people of the sea. Ryukyu people sails to Japan in 7-8 days and trade gold and copper. Everything that we trade with the Ryukyu people comes from Japan, and the Ryukyu people trades with them textiles from Luzon and other merchandises. So Japan actually was trading, and Charles Boxer even mentioned that maybe many of those Ryukyu people that appear, for example, in Malacca, actually they were samurai, that they were not as Japanese, but at the service of Ryukyu trade. So Goa was the basis of Portugal in Asia. The city was conquered by Afonso de Albuquerque to the Muslims in 1510 and became officially the capital of the Estado da India, so the Portuguese possessions and influences in Asia since 1530. So it was from there that the great ship, then the Grofne, started its voyage after 1550. Just first to show that, with this map to remember that this was the area that was performed, so from Goa to Malacca, from Malacca to Macau, and Macau to Japan. But that the people, the adventurers who discovered Japan, who arrived to Japan and discovered it, of course, in that sense, in 1543, were not Portuguese officials. The people, the fellows who arrived to China in 1513, they were at the service of the captain of Malacca. But these people were privateers who were making trade, going out of Malacca and were making trade. And finally, in 1543, despite all difficulties they had with the Chinese authorities, they got a way of having ephemeral bases in Fujian. And it was only when the Portuguese were able, due to the monsoon, to have an ephemeral what bases in China, that they were able to go farther to arrive to Japan. And they did it in a Chinese junk, not in a Portuguese ship at the first time. So it was something private. And this book that we have here on the left is the Peregrinação. It is a book of one of the who claims to have been the first. He was not, but he was second or the third, but he was one of the firsts for sure. And the episodes that he describes in his peregrination look familiar. For what we know, it was the first interactions between Portuguese and Japanese, and of some of the records that, for example, were produced by the Otomo family of Funai or Oita nowadays. So in 1543, Japan was introduced in the Age of Discoveries. I would like to spend a minute with this concept. First time I arrived to Japan in 1991, I was told immediately, we didn't discover us because we knew that we exist. Of course, of course. Because there was a mistake, not in the word, but in the concept. And it was an European mistake. The European mistake was that for a long time, 20th century, most of the Western people spoke about their discoveries. And it is wrong. But it's not the word that is wrong, it's the subject that is wrong. Nowadays, as a scholar, I was trained not to say that. Because as a scholar, when I started to make my master's, that then delivered the thesis, the first year that I spent learning not Portuguese activities, but history of Asia, history of the Indian Ocean, history of Africa. So first I learned about the others, about the areas, the peoples, the geography of all other countries of the world, to understand how the Portuguese acted, because the way how the Portuguese acted anywhere, including India or Japan, depending not so only of what was the Portuguese will, but mainly of what was the local people, interests, abilities, whatever. That's why, for example, very shortly, the Portuguese arrived to Calicut, and Calicut, the king of Calicut was not interested in that trade, but King of Cochin called immediately the Portuguese because he was a rival of Calicut, and he has spices to sell. He wanted arms to fight Calicut. So that's what, as in Japan, which was in the Sengoku Jidai, easily the Portuguese got allies from some of the daimyo against the other daimyo. This is a picture from the Namba Mbyombo. So it was the screens. And here is the curiosity. Here is the discovery. So yes, there was discoveries in this sense, and that's the right sense of the word. So we have to change the concept, not the word. The word is good. Because in the 16th century, or since the 15th century, the world, mankind lived the age of discoveries in the sense that every society was alone. Most of them, as Japan, it was almost isolated. In Japan, the idea of the external world was the Senkoku, 3 countries, and then moved to Bankoku, infinite countries, because Ban 10,000, but actually meaning infinite, countless countries. So this is I think that I'd like to have this idea as one of the most important from my presentation. And look, the memory of that arrival of the Portuguese in Tanegashima by a Japanese chronicle written in the beginning of the 17th century is the chronicle of a discovery, the musket, teppo, the gunfire. So actually, even in Japan, it is acknowledgement of, yes, we discovered them. Yes, we discovered what they brought. And look at the left is the Tono, the statue in Tanegashima of the Tono, who was the ruler of the island in the name of the Shimazu of Satsuma. And look, he's a samurai with his swords, but with a gunfire in his hand, because he's the statue wants to make remember how important was this man, because it was the first Japanese authority who was the musket in its sense, and the musket later, through the ability and the genius of Oda Nobunaga, started ending the Sengoku Jidai after the Battle of Nagashino, when, for the first time in the world, a battle was won by the fire of muskets. And every year since then, nowadays, in Tanegashima in August, there is a festival about the teppo. And then, of course, Xavier. Of course, that after the teppo, it was Christianity that was also brought. Look, Christianity was born in Asia, moved to Europe, and came back and arrived to Japan. Well, it was arrived as an European facade, but we are going to look at, yes, some Indian details. I will go back to Asian details. But as musket was an European arm with gunpowder that was invented by Chinese, so this was a globalization that was occurring with many discoveries or even religions thinking that had spread first in Asia, that moved to Europe, and now Europe was bringing again in new shapes again to Asia in other ways. I like very much this statue of Xavier, that hundreds of thousands of statues of Xavier in Japan. This is in Oita, late ancient Funai. And this is very interesting because it is not only the missionary, but the route he made. Because this is very important in Japan, from what I know, is how far they came. And this is important. And of course, India is behind the statue, but India is there too. And it's important because this mission of Xavier was prepared in Goa, it was prepared in India. The Portuguese, as I told you, the Portuguese who discovered, who first encountered Japan, were settled in Malacca. And they were privateers, they were not members of the crown, but they informed immediately the captain of the fortress, as well as the missionary, Xavier, who was there because he had gone to Moluccas. And they presented him, it is on your left here, a samurai, Yajiro, who had a fight and he got a sanctuary in a Portuguese ship by 1547, 48. And this Yajiro accepted to be Christian and came with them to Goa. And in Goa, it was in Goa that the mission was prepared, and that the gospel, according to Matthew, was translated into Japanese. So the first translation of a Christian text to Japanese was done in Goa, with the support, of course, of a Japanese, but it was in India. And so it was from Goa that, and then Cochin, that Xavier departed and sailed to Japan. And it made something different that was not economically profitable, that he sailed directly to Japan. But because it was not the proper way, I will explain later, because finally in 1550, this trade that the Portuguese were starting, because as you know, there was a bad relationship between China and Japan, and as a neutral party, the Portuguese were able to penetrate in that trade. And then as they were able also to secure the mouth of the Pearl River from the Waco, they were accepted by the Chinese to be settled in Macau. And then, so they started this great route that was awarded every year by the crown to a veteran of India. So one of the Portuguese who were here in India, supporting the Estado de India, and as a reward, instead of more land that the country has not, so you get business, go to business. The best account and the best analysis of these travels every year was done by Charles Boxer a long time ago. But this book is not repressible. It's done. It's done. Can be added, but it's done. And this is the great shipper from Amacon. So the Portuguese had this monopoly, and this ship was a very global ship because it sailed from Goa with a cargo of Gujarati textiles, which were traded for spices in Southeast Asia, which was traded for silk in Macau, and finally to get the Japanese silver. And when coming back, they were bringing porcelains, copper, and lacquers from Japan. And in India, this business between China and Japan, it was evaluated in 10% of the annual amount of revenue of the Goa's customs. So it was very important also to India. The profits of this trip were benefiting the Portuguese in Goa. Now beyond Namban Biombo, this is very interesting because on the left you have the imagination of the Japanese about how should be India, because you see that there the church is not in wood but in stone, and you see the elephants. So the two elements that distinguish from what is the normally Japanese style facade, like you see in the right, you see that the churches are in wood as all the temples in Japan. Looking more closely, here is India in the imagination of the Japanese artists, and here the arrival of the Portuguese. I have not much time, but look, for example, and what is discovery, the Portuguese that do not support to be over their knees. I tried that, it's dark. So over their knees, they prefer to be seated in a chair. So there's a slave bringing a chair for his master, as well as they always have dogs as puppets. And as it was not normal in Japan, so this Nambanjin claiming with these pets. Okay, but there are lots of images like this in the man, but and also animals from India, like the peacock. And it was something new. So the Japanese through the Portuguese were not discovering only European things, but world things, as the African people, as well as an Indian animal, which is the peacock. So that's what was carrying in that ship. It's interesting. This is an article that we published in this Bulletin of Portuguese Japanese Studies I showed you, because from the 1549 to 1582, before the creation of the vice province of the Jesuits in Japan, which was autonomous, the mission was dependent from Goa. And when the first missionaries started having a lot of baptisms, but in a mission that was running well, but with some questions that were difficult for them. For example, can a baptized guy to make fire in the pyre where his Buddhist father will be burned to ashes? They thought, in Japan, they thought yes. In India, because the answer was not, it was written in India, but with an European mind, of course. It was no, they can't, they are Christian, Okay. But that's to say that our Japan mission in the beginning, the missionaries were looking to India to have solutions for their own problems. And then what is, I think, one thing that comes from what we spoke first about the Buddhism. This is in Nagasaki, developed quickly a European style painting school. This is, if I would not use, if I showed the Christ without the lacquer, I think you should believe it had been drawn in Europe, but it was drawn in Japan. But look the face. And I assure you that almost the Christ crucified I saw crafted or drawn in Asia from Goa to Nagasaki, they have this face, meaning the face of the Buddha. Not Christ suffering, but Christ enlightened, as the enlightened Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. And this is something that was not demanded by anybody. This is how the Asian artists that were compelled to work for Christians, or that even got themselves Christian, but they didn't lost all their memories pre-Christians. And any Asian Christian could understand how did this God had been crucified as a thief. It was unacceptable. And so they moved, and there was no Inquisition that could avoid this. So this is another Christ, for example, but if it is in Europe, it's like this. This is the usual, very realistic. This is realistic. Christ in the cross was not enlightened. Christ in the cross was suffering. Of course, he died in the cross. But is the difference between what is religious art in Europe, which is very realistic, or in Asia, which is much more metaphoric. Nobody believes that Shiva has 6 arms, or much more than what Avalokiteshvara, with all these hundreds of arms that can be represented. So it's a metaphor. But in Europe, it's not thinkable to do metaphors. We try to be realistic. And then who were the Portuguese? Because this is the same picture you chose. You chose for. It's also very interesting because look why did I bring this here? Look, here we have, if you look well, the 3 guys over are Europeans, are the older Europeans. They have 2 slaves, Africans, and they are 3 boys. The 3 boys look Japanese. So the Portuguese can be Europeans, Africans, or Asians. Here, because it was a Japanese artist, and because it was the ship that was sailing between Macau and Nagasaki, most of these Portuguese father, but Asian-born Portuguese, which were all of them from Asian mothers, because just a few of Portuguese women came to Asia in the 16th century. Of course, they should be Chinese. Most of them in Nagasaki should be Chinese or Japanese, but they could be also Indians, born in Goa, in Cochin, from at this time in the 80s, even from a father already born in India, from, for example, Portuguese and a Persian or an Indian woman. And then that had married again, this mestizo son, had again married with another Indian women. So meaning that most of these Portuguese that are traveling in this Curofne, they were Asians. And if they will take out these clothes and will dress with something from Asia, they look like Asians. And they speak, and they could speak the language of their mothers. And they understood the Buddhism, the Confucius or Shiva as no other European Portuguese would understand. So that's why there was all this Portuguese trade in Asia beyond the empire. It was because it was performed not by Europeans, white-skinned people, Caucasians, but by these Asian Portuguese that are here, that are pictured here by the Japanese artist. Just finishing, this is the first embassy that of Japanese who went to Rome through India. So when they went back, they could speak not by what the Portuguese, for the first time, Japanese could hear about India by Japanese. Gigi wa Miguel, Ito Mancio, Nakaura Julian, and Hara Martinho. It was a tremendous success of the Jesuits, but they are, remember, this is a statue that exists nowadays in close to Omura. This is the street, this is the way from Omura city to the airport, which is in Omura 1, but it is the airport of Nagasaki. The name of the airport is Nagasaki, not of Omura. Omura Sumitada, when gave Nagasaki to the Portuguese, will be losing 400 years the name of the airport for the other city, not for his own capital. And look, what is very funny that in this statue, that is very nice because it's looking to where did they went and from where they came. Look that they are very similar to this picture, but nowadays respect for these half European of these Jesuits, these boys that all of them were Jesuits later. So and then they have looked at their hair. So the Japanese style hair, despite an European dress, and this is very nice. Just a word, say Gigi Miguel then apostatized. Ito Mancio was a priest and died before persecutions. Nakaura Julian was a martyr, and Hara Martinho was an exile to Macau where he died. So four people, four destinies, completely different, but all of them with the memory of India that they for sure spread in Japan. Finishing. So this is one of the best books about the Portuguese in Japan, is the History of Japan of Luís Freud, a hero that is very well considered even in Japanese intellectuals and historians of the 16th century. And he reports that in 1584, in the battle of the coalition Arima Shimazu fought against Ryuzoji Takanobu, who was the emerging power in Kyushu after the downfall of the Otomo house. In the Battle of Okinawate, where Takanobu died, actually, it was, and Freud claims that victory also was with the support of the Portuguese, that from a boat were making fire with a cannon, and that cannon was make fire by a Portuguese, an African, and an Indian. From each time, between each fire, they pray a Padre Nosso. But then they kill a little more people, and then they pray again. But that's to say that Indians were there. Indians were there in Japan with the Portuguese. That's the move. And then just to really finish, this is the map to understand that is coming from India to Japan. These were the fiefs who were under a baptized daimyo before the Battle of Sekigahara. There were no missions in all of them, but it was even Tsushima was under Japanese baptized, to say that all these this influence of the Portuguese in Japan was strong. There were two possibilities: the one less natural of Oda Nobunaga, to accommodate them and to use them as exotic, or to refuse them by suspicion, as Toyotomi Hideyoshi and then Tokugawa Ieyasu did, and went to Japan to Sakoku. And just to say that I experienced also that also in my novels. I'm also a novel writer, and my last experience was to this trilogy about the Portuguese in Japan and in India, which I also offer to Japan Foundation today. And thank you so much again for this opportunity you conceded to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Costa. This is most fascinating. Particularly, the fact that I just wonder, the first Japanese who came to Goa and the first Indians who went to Japan, I wish one had accounts about, what they felt. Yeah, particularly, and the Japanese, how they reacted to the Nanbanjin who came from there. That's most interesting. Over to you, Professor Helen Bhutan. Are you online?
We have to take out this.
Yes. Yes. Hello, everybody. Thank you first to the organizers of this wonderful event, which highlights, the importance of the interactions between India and Japan. And I'm really sorry I could not make the trip to Delhi. I would have loved being with you, but it was really impossible for me due to professional and personal obligations. So I'm deeply sorry, but thank you for letting me, being with you, also virtually, So thank you also to Professor Costa for really this fascinating talk. And I would like maybe to emphasize some points of Professor Costa talk and maybe add, and build up on what he talked about. So firstly, Professor Costa reminded us that interaction between India and Japan are quite old, in fact, but they are not evident. It's, very often when I'm talking with European scholars, specialized on European countries, for them, it's quite evident that since you are working on, Asia and on interactions between, India and Japan, that these interactions are quite evident. But I don't think so. It's something that is built over the time and during a long period. And also, Professor Costa reminded us the role of Portugal in these interactions during the early modern period. And I think it's quite also important. And it is something that is now emphasized by the scholarship. That is the complexity of the interactions in the China Sea with European, but also different Asian actors, sailing across the seas, especially as Professor Costa reminded us that on the Kurofune, you have, of course, Portuguese, but also, people coming from Indonesia, India, and so on. And your PowerPoint shows very well how still today we can see in the public space, in Japan, through, for example, the statues, these very interactions, which are still remembered by the people. So the Kurofune trade was not only a trade, between China, Macau, and Japan, because very often when you read the scholarship, and of course, when you read Boxer, the trade is presented mainly as the route, the sea route between Macau and Japan, and of course, China. But the trade route begins, in fact, in Goa, the capital of the Estado da India. And so very often these interactions between India and Japan are overshadowed by the links between China and Japan. Although, these economic, religious, cultural interactions are quite numerous. And I think the Kurofune is a wonderful example of these exchanges, between India and Japan. So in these very short comments, because I think we don't have much time, I would like to emphasize, maybe several points on the Jesuits' presence in Asia, since I'm a specialist of the Jesuit missions. And more specifically, I would like to stress the links between India, and Japan. And we will come back, of course, to the Kurofune and to some comments, Professor Costa did in his talk. So all the missions in Asia, all the Catholic missions in Asia, and under the guidance of the Society of Jesus, belong to an administrative framework of what we called the Indian province, whose center was in Goa. So in the early phase of the Jesuits' presence in Asia, there was only the Indian province, and the Japanese and the Chinese missions were directly integrated inside the Indian province. So to put it another way, the Japanese mission started off as an offshoot, as an extension of the Indian province. And this pattern directly reflected the organization of the Portuguese presence in India, with Goa as the religious and as the administrative capital, of the Portuguese Asian Empire. So of course, Goa hence clearly intended to control the East Asian mission. So, for example, the Goan authorities certainly would not leave, the East Asian missions to their own device. But as Professor Costa reminded us, the Japanese missions often turn to Goa for spiritual directions. And very often, as Professor Costa told us, missionaries in Japan had what we call, spiritual doubts. In Latin, they call it dubia. So, for example, can a Christian convert marry a non-Christian? It was the typical question that were raised in the missionary field in Japan. And the important point is that the missionaries in Japan turns to Goa and not to Rome to answer these spiritual questions. We, could imagine that since Rome was the Catholic, center, the missionaries would ask the question in priority to Rome, but in fact, they preferred to turn to Goa. And I think that because it was, the Asian center for the missionaries, for the missions, the answers were think to be more accurate coming from Goa and coming from Rome, with a different culture, with a different view of religion. So they prefer to turn, in fact, to India than to Rome. So another way, another link that you can have between Goa and Japan for this from the missionary point of view is that Goa was initially proactive in controlling the new mission in Japan. That, for example, we have what we call the provincial, that is the head of the mission in India.
एक सेकंड, टेक्नीशियन साहब कुछ कर रहे हैं कंट्रोल रूम से। नहीं कुछ बोलना सर?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, we can see and hear you clearly.
भालू माशी, बट मेरे को आवाज नहीं आ रही आपकी।
I think she's lost.
कुछ भी नहीं सुनाई दे रहा, बस लिप्स रीडिंग कर रहा हूं मैं आपकी। अच्छा ठीक है, समझ गया। ठीक है, बोलना कुछ सर, कुछ तो बोलो। हाँ ये क्या?
Hello. Can you hear me?
पीपीटी प्रेजेंटेशन में एक प्रॉब्लम ये है कि जो पीपीटी विंडो 11 पे है और अभी हम विंडो 8 पे काम कर रहे हैं, तो मुझे फिर इसको शट डाउन करना पड़ेगा, वहां से पीपीटी कॉपी करनी पड़ेगी और यहाँ पे फिर दोबारा से पेस्ट करनी। मैं दिखाना नहीं चाह रहा था पूरी शक्ल जी।
I think you can go ahead and sort of maybe conclude your comments now, because we can hear you perfectly well.
Okay, I hear you perfectly well too.
Yeah.
I was talking about the spiritual links, we can say, inside the missionary field in Asia between India and Japan. And I was talking about a visit paid by a prominent head of the Jesuits in India to Japan in 1554 to boost, in fact, the missionary efforts in Japan. And my last point, I would like to emphasize how the Japanese missions was financially dependent on its Indian supervisor. So in the first year, the financing of the Japanese mission depended essentially from donation from the King of Portugal. But these donations were supplemented by the purchase of land in India by the Japanese Jesuits. So in fact, the Japanese Jesuits were owning land in India. especially in the north of the Goa, in the Bassein area, in the north of Goa. And the income from, in the Indian lands were then transferred to Japan. So in fact, the Japanese mission was forced to rely on its Indian counterpart, were forced to rely on the Indian mission for the funds, for, of course, a lot of objects that were, that were sold on the Kurofune from Goa to Nagasaki, and also the Jesuits in Japan invested, in fact, in the Kurofune to have also money, more money, because the money transferred from India, sometimes you can have a shipwreck and so on. So sometimes they didn't receive the money. The Jesuits in Japan chose to invest themselves in the black ship, in the Kurofune. So of course, these investments were mainly purchase of raw silk bought in China. But if we take a close look at the list of objects purchased by the Jesuits and which were transported on the Kurofune, we find a variety of clothing in cotton, for example, which maybe came from India rather than China. So the sources are unfortunately quite silent on the purchase made by the Jesuits in India. If they were involved in merchant networks, did they use intermediaries in India for their purchase? But I hope
Professor Bhutan, can you just sort of conclude? I think we're running out of time a little bit.
Yes, I'm concluding. But I hope that in the near future, we will find more evidences of the strong financial and commercial links between India and Japan. And thank you again to Professor Costa to have highlighted, these connections in the early modern period, and to the organizers of this event. And I'm sure that this event will boost, research on this important topic of the interactions between India and Japan during the early modern period. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. And thank you for highlighting the centrality of Goa and the important role that Goa played, really, particularly in respect of the Jesuit missionary work in Japan. I think, Professor, because of shortage of time, I perhaps can take one question. Is there any question that we could have from the audience? We've had such a wonderful presentation. Or shall we keep it for the end? Yeah, I think, thank you again. Well, that was really a most interesting session that we've had. The next speaker that we have is Professor Masumi Igrashi, whom we all know very well, Senior Assistant Professor at the Center for Liberal Arts and Language Education, Okayama University. She was earlier a museum curator. Her main interests are Japanese modern artists and their international activities. The discussant is someone known to all of us very well in Delhi and in India, Professor Rajiv Lochan, an eminent scholar artist. He was of the National Gallery of Modern Art. In fact, we so associated NGMA with him for several decades. Recipient of Japanese government fellowships, he's held many exhibitions of his artworks with both national and international recognition. Over to you, Professor Igarashi. This is really very interesting because we look at the cultural exchanges between India and Japanese painters during the beginning of the 20th century. I must say that before I was coming here, I have just by coincidence, saw this book that was lying with me, which was by about Yoshida Hiroshi, who came to India in 1930, and the woodblock prints. I mean, it's just absolutely fascinating, the kind of, the pictures that he drew of India that period of time. So obviously, this was a period of a lot of exchanges. So over to you. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much for kind introduction, Madam Ambassador. And first of all, I'd like to say congratulations on launching of this India-Japan Study Forum. It's an exciting project. Also, thank you for inviting me, Mosai and the Embassy of Japan and the Japan Foundation, all people who made this happen to this inaugural lecture. It's quite an honor. Okay, let me begin. My talk today is about India-Japan relationship in modern art. First, I will talk about, I will talk about how it started. It's all the same story, many people have talked, and what effect it brought to both countries. Then I will present you some issues we face today in studies of this international and historical artistic exchanges. The beginning of the exchanges is Japanese art critic and educator Okakura Kakuzo's visit to India in 1901. He actually left Japan in December of 1901 and arrived in Calcutta in January of 1902. So it took him like more than a month. And so you can see that it's not an easy trip. It took me 8 hours from Tokyo last week. So, okay, anyway, let me tell you about a little bit of background of this key person. As you know, in the process of modernizing the country in the late 19th century, Japan almost abandoned traditional cultures and adapted Western cultures, including art and religions. These are from two famous temples in Nara, Kofukuji, this one is Kofukuji, then Toshodaiji. People lost faith in religion, especially in Buddhism, and the new governments did not support them too. As a result, many important temples fell into trouble financially. They could not maintain their property anymore, and even statues of the Buddhas and deities. These are pictures of those statues abandoned in the storage without proper care. It's so sad. And the Japanese artists began to learn Western paintings because one of the reasons is, of course, traditional paintings lost its customers and oil painting became popular. Even the government of Japan encouraged the Western style and invited Western painters as teachers. Isn't it a familiar story to you? Yes, I think so. These are oil paintings by Ravi Verma, hugely popular in 19th century India. Then in Japan, Ernest Fenollosa, a young American employed by the government of Japan to educate Japanese students in Western ways, happened to discover the value of Japanese traditional art. Okakura, who was Fenollosa's former student at the Tokyo University, later working for Monbusho, helped Fenollosa promote traditional style of painting and organize exhibitions and study groups. Then they together pressured the government to establish art school for traditional art. That is the Tokyo Art School, Tokyo University of Art today. Later, Okakura became the principal of the school. Similar phenomenon occurred in India a little later. The colonial government tried to promote Western style painting by establishing art schools. The Government School of Art Calcutta was one of them. However, in the school, the principal, Ernest Binfield Havel, realized the beauty of Indian paintings and defended them. With him, Abanindranath Tagore reformed the school programs for new Indian art, not for Western art anymore. I hope you see a similar pattern here with some support from Western Orientalists. Indigenous nationalists, artists, and cultural critics stood up to defend the traditional art, rediscover their values, and promote it. I think it is a typical path for many non-Western countries, inevitably to take in the process of the modernization of the country. What amazes me, though, is that key persons in this pattern in different countries coincidentally encountered at the beginning of the 20th century. Okay, I moved back to Okakura in India. What brought him to India is not certain. Most probable theory is that it is Swami Vivekananda. Informed about Vivekananda's success at the World Parliament of Religions in 1893 in Chicago, United States, Okakura wanted to meet him. Okakura was planning a world conference of religions in Japan and hoping to invite Vivekananda to Japan. Unfortunately, Vivekananda's health condition did not allow him to travel to Japan. Soon in July, he passed away. However, through Vivekananda, Okakura met several important people of the cultural revival movement in Bengal. One of such people is Rabindranath Tagore. In their brief meetings, what they discussed was unknown, but it seems that Rabindra had empathy with Okakura's quest to revive and develop traditional art against prevailing influence of Western art. Later, Rabindra asked Okakura to send some Japanese artists to India. This is the beginning of Japanese artists' visit to India. Okakura sent his two disciples to India upon his return to Japan. Yokoyama Taikan on your left and Hishida Shunso on your right. In 1903, the two artists arrived in Calcutta. They stayed at the Tagore residence at Jorasanko and often interacted with Abanindranath and Gaganindranath Tagore. Abanindra taught them about Indian subjects such as customs and goddesses, and Taikan and Shunso painted works of such subjects. This is by some of paintings by Taikan and also these Shunso. Abanindra had opportunities to observe the Japanese artist painting skills. Especially, Abanindra seemed to be impressed by Taikan's wash technique, in which a painter blurs figures or background using a wet brush without any pigment, or simply using just water, just like washing out unnecessary pigment. It brought an effect that is completely opposite to oil painting. Abanindra and later Nandalal both adapted this technique to their own paintings. When Indian artists resisted Western influence, Taikan brought an alternative that is much more akin to their own tradition. On Taikan and Shunso's side, visiting India and interacting with people there brought some changes in their paintings. Before, Indian subjects were almost exclusively Buddhist religious icons in Japan. In other words, India was known to many Japanese artists only as the origin of Buddhism. Moreover, those subjects were understood through Chinese filters. However, Taikan and Shunso experienced life in modern India. With Abanindra's support, the two Japanese artists broadened their scope of Indian subjects. When we think about exchanges among Indian and Japanese artists, Taikan, Shunso, Rabindranath, and Abanindranath are the first generation, and their relationships remained much later. When Rabindra visited Japan in 1924, Nandara accompanied him. Because Okakura and Shunso had passed away by then, Taikan hosted Rabindra and his companies in Japan. This is a picture of Taikan and Nandara taken at Taikan's residence in Tokyo. After Taikan and Shunso, Japanese artists kept coming to India through Tagore connection. The next artist is Katsuta Shokin. I presented a paper on him in the 2018 conference, and it is published, as they said, so you may take a look at it for the detail through Mosai website. Rabindra asked Okakura to send a Japanese painter as a teacher in the Tagore family, Tagore household. This may be a predecessor of the later known as Vichitra art studio. Staying at the Tagore's at Jorasanko, Shokin taught the youth in the Tagore family. In his diary, we can see Abanindra and Gaganindra took a very good care of him. Abanindra seemed to teach Shokin Indian subject from Ramayana and other Indian classics. Those Indian subjects were new to Japanese artists who had known Indian subject only as Buddhist paintings. Abanindra appointed Shokin to be a visiting teacher at the Government School of Art, Calcutta, where Abanindra with Havel reprogrammed to promote Indian national art. Unfortunately, Shokin had to return to Japan early due to his worsening financial and health condition. However, one of his post-Indian works, The Departure of the Buddha, here you are seeing, remains one of his masterpieces today. Although this work is a Buddhist subject, it is not a strictly religious icon anymore, and it became a kind of history painting. India became not just a remote, unrealistic origin of Buddhism, but a country with a rich history and lively people for Shokin. After Shokin,
You want to change the presenter?
Thank you so much. We always need that kind of life savior. Thank you. It says that I'm muted. Am I okay? All right. Yes, okay. Then after Shokin, several artists visited India upon request of Rabindra. Dr. Eve Lo Kazahara presented a paper on this subject at the previous conference. She provided a chronological list of those artists with biographical information. Especially Alai Kampo is noted as a beloved artist by Rabindra. Rabindra met Kampo when he visited Japan in 1916. Rabindra asked Kampo to copy some Japanese art for him so that Rabindra could take them home. Then he asked Kampo to come to India. While teaching at the Vichitra, Kampo in India studied ancient Buddhist sites. We know Kampo visited Puri and Konarak with Nandarar and copied wall paintings at Ajanta. His later works reflect his study and experiences there. Some of his works commissioned by Rabindra remain in the museums at Shantiniketan today. Okay, these exchanges between India and Japan are surely important, but there are many holes to be filled. For example, the first generation of these exchanges, that is Abindra, Nandarar in India, and the Taikan and the Shunso from Japan, has attracted much attention from scholars of Japan and India. But the second generation, that is Shokin and after, has not studied thoroughly. The second area that we need more research is Indian artists who worked with these Japanese visiting artists or who were influenced by them. We do know that Abanindra and Nandarar adopted Taikan's wash painting technique, but we do not know about other artists well and what else they learned from Japanese art. Some of Abanindra's students, Satindranath Mazumdar, I hope I'm pronouncing right. Okay, Professor Rochan helped me. M.A.R. Chugatai and Krishnappa Venkatappa, Sarada Wukir, Barda Wukir, and Mukude, all these Abanindra students, they adopted wash technique, but these artists still remain relatively unknown in Japan. Okay, the third area that we should study more is various activities Japanese visiting artists. What exactly did they do in India? Many of them were invited as a teacher, but we do not know who their students were and what they taught to the students. They must have produced many paintings in India, but we do not have many examples. For Taikan, Shunso, and Shokin, we know they produced many paintings of Indian subject with help from Abanindra. One well-known example is painting of Sujata. Here. Okay. Dr. Sato Shino at the Taikan Museum in Tokyo once presented Sujata paintings by these three artists and pointed out, of course, obviously, the similarity. She also presented a popular print that might be a model for the Shunso's Sarasvati. Hosting these Japanese artists, Abanindra must have shown them many examples of Indian paintings and prints to be samples. We also know Abanindra helped Shokin to paint Ramayana subject from Shokin's diary. Abanindra taught him the story and its highlight. in the 2018 conference, I introduced this painting, Rama, Sita, and Lakshmana in the Forest by Shokin. This was a book illustration, so sorry about the quality. And the real painting itself seemed to be in hand of grandchild of Abanindra today. Then in 2020, in an Indian art gallery, DAG, Dark World, at the Claridge's Hotel, which is very close from here, contacted me and told me that they have a painting that may be by Shokin. The picture is of Rama's departure. We know Shokin painted this particular subject from his diary, but nobody in Japan had never seen the actual painting, and nobody knew where it was. I was so excited and ready to visit India again to see the painting by myself. However, the COVID-19 came and I could not see it until this time. Dr. Kishore Singh at the DAG kindly arranged, Mr. Kishore Singh at DAG kindly arranged a special viewing for me last Saturday. It is a beautiful piece and relatively in good condition. In Shokin's sketchbook, we see this drawing, probably his study for figure who leans on pillow cushion, father, king. The reason I introduced this episode of mine here is that I think there must be many other works like this case in India. When Taikan, Shinso, and Shokin ran out of money in India, the Tagores helped them by organizing their exhibitions and let them sell their paintings. The record shows that the artist created a lot of paintings to sell, or other times they created Indian subject, paintings of Indian subject by commission from Tagore family members. However, we do not have those paintings today, with only a few exceptions like this. There must be paintings of Indian subject by Japanese artists. We should collect information about them. I hope this becomes a good start, and in the near future, a lot more paintings will come to the surface. As a concluding note, I would like to say this. Indian scholars of Japanese culture, Indian students who are interested in Japanese art, there are many things you can help the development of studies in this field. I would like to encourage you, go to libraries, government archives in India, search record in the Tagore household, the colonial government, and the Bengal public records. Visit museums and art collectors. You should dig up dusty documents and find forgotten Japanese paintings. In such research, Indian scholars and students have big advantages in languages and access to institutions. So please do. There will be a treasure hidden in a dark corner of archives and museum storages. That will be a huge contribution to this field. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I'm going to ask Rajiv Lochanji to come and sit here, and maybe we'll have really a discussion. This is absolutely fascinating, you know, what you have been able to discover. And I'm sure Rajiv ji will know, please. Probably knows of more paintings which are hidden away somewhere in there.
Well, I had a lot of notes because I knew what she was going to speak, but I'm going to keep that aside. Well, must congratulate all of you, the organizers, whom I don't wish to name personally, for having initiated a dialogue of this nature. And must compliment you for putting these 4 decades and more into a capsule. Well, my compliments. And I'd like to start on a philosophical note by no other than quoting from no other than Marcel Proust. I'm going to be brief, just going to raise some questions. Each one of us is similar and dissimilar to each one of us, as many as there are eyes and minds that awaken every morning. The role of a creator is to provide an image to it, as our observations are not mere passive records. I think what you have tried to do today, and that's what I'm summing up as, is truly a cross-pollination of sensibilities, which has happened in the past. And I wonder why we have not done the same kind of research that you are engaged. It's an area of my interest because I have a personal engagement with this period, with the people of this land, and with the people in the creation of those, which I will come to later. Would you not say that this is truly a revalidation of tradition, that both in the context of your country and my country, we're trying to do at this creative level?
Oh.
Your response.
Okay, I have a mic. Okay,
Yes.
You said
Revalidation.
revalidation. Okay, okay. The
Revalidation of tradition.
tradition by those artists
Yes,
in the period.
absolutely.
Okay, revalidation. Yeah, I think some people said they are going to rediscover the value, the forgotten value, but probably we can say that they are trying to create new things, maybe combining new art and traditional art. They want to keep their, national tradition, but they want to keep up with the Western, I don't know, new
Can I add
knowledge.
here?
Yeah,
Can
of
I
course,
add here?
of course.
That's what I was waiting for you to say. That, well, the inner vitality of matter,
Mhm.
the search, that was the Japanese spirit, both in as well as in Indian spirit,
Mhm.
with a new technique and a conceptual framework.
Mhm.
This is what this true exchange between Japan and India did. And as a result of Okakura and the several artists that you have shown your work in terms of, the residues of that cross-pollination
Oh.
are the works of art. Because works of art, and that's why I said works of art, they are the only living examples of the transformation of culture.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
That would
that's-
be, I think you'll have to keep the mic closer to you. I can't hear the
Sorry,
mic.
in my excitement, I was really wondering that, how are we going to make a dialogue? Because it was, I think, besides one thing very interesting that I found.
Can you
was
hear at
that-
the back? Is it okay? Or-
Yeah, I thought I
Sorry.
was loud enough.
Yeah, sure, sure. Yeah.
One thing very interesting that I found that even I didn't have a clear idea of, that it was actually Vivekananda's
Right.
this thing, vis-a-vis Tagore. Tagore comes in much later.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Tagore comes in much. But I think the celebration of E.B. Hevel, like Okakura, perhaps needs to be relooked at.
Right.
Because it was unfortunate that E.B. Hevel, what should I say, moved out of the scene.
Right. Ari, because
for
of
whatever
his
reason.
health, probably health
Yeah.
condition.
Absolutely, whatever the scene. But then I think and there's another name that comes to my mind is Sir John Woodroffe, who has written several books, Shakti and Shakta and various other, who even said that I shall wipe out the cow dung of the British Empire. These were the kind of nationalists. So perhaps that was also that nationalist spirit that,
Right.
we need to look at.
Yes. Yes.
I think these are questions that have emanated from your talk, which I'm only trying to, rather than just discussing, trying to enhance more. Yeah, would you?
Okay, probably the Havel is an interesting person to look at, but unfortunately, as you said, he went out from the scene early. And also in Japan, we don't have much information about him. I don't think there is any material in Japanese, maybe some, probably I just don't know. And when we think about Havel, we always need to think about Fenorosa, because it's they are kind of a counterpart, helping Japanese, helping Indian to revive their tradition. Then the evaluation of Fenorosa is kind of, I don't know, it's not stable.
You did draw a parallel between Raja Ravi Verma and the introduction of Western academic principles and all that. Well, that aside, because this is like a revival. In fact, in India, we call Bengal school as the new Renaissance.
Oh, right, Bengal Renaissance.
Bengal school as the new Renaissance. People may agree, they may disagree. That's a different matter, so to say. And in continuation with that, there are, in fact, you named a couple of artists, and I'm very, I take that opportunity to say that I come from a family of artists as the last descendant of this tradition.
Okay.
My father was the disciple of Asit Kumar Haldar, who was the disciple of Abanindranath Tagore. So here is this lineage, and in that context, I want to say, what is your reaction as this new technique that developed of wash painting,
right?
Which was a synthesis of ukiyo, of sumie on one side and Japanese painting on the other, which I think was also an influence of this formatic effect that you see in Western academic realism.
Like Impressionist, probably.
No, Renaissance. This formata, the background merging with the main image. The pigment almost getting washed out.
Okay, but sometimes in Japan, Taikan's wash painting can be said have some influence from Western Impressionist, Western painting, because there are some people in West who try to express the atmosphere, not the figure and the landscape.
Not the immediate reality, but the experiential reality.
Right, atmosphere. And that kind of, things could affect Taikan or Shinso, because they are not just studying traditional
and in fact, I think it is Arai Kampo who had a great impact as far as the evolution of wash painting along with Abanindranath Tagore. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Good.
Actually, I have seen a picture of Abanindra and Nandalal with wash painting, wash technique, but I didn't know much about other artists, other Abanindra's students. Yeah, right. Yesterday, I had opportunity to visit the National Gallery of Modern Art, where Professor Rochon was director. Okay, and I was surprised. There are lots of people, students, who actually use technique, and but I don't know that why do they use that technique? That technique can be expressed the atmosphere of the place, or but it's not just atmosphere. That there must be some kind of philosophical background, because they did not want to express things directly. They want to just blur things and let the observer,
the experiential residue.
Right. Yeah. Then the
in
observers.
fact, I'll include here the last paintings. In fact, National Gallery of Modern Art has about 6,000 plus works of Nandalal Bose.
Oh my God.
And the last period of his, you would be very excited. I'm getting goose flesh talking to you. The last works of Nandalal Bose in themselves are like wonderful sumies, which are so minimalistic in their expression. So truly, yes.
Okay.
Last question. What do you think of another person who's been celebrated in Japan called Fuku Akino, who came to Shantiniketan and rose to be a national treasure of Japan, whose retrospective I really wanted to have during my tenure and couldn't be possible. I'm only raising questions for future
Yeah,
research.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I have to admit I don't know much about her, but she also came from Okakura's tradition. Okakura's institution, Nihon Bijutsuin, that is established by Okakura, and once it's then Taikan re-established it as a new institution, and it continues today. And they have intend annual exhibition every year. And Akinofuku is one of
One of
the
the prime artists of-
right. Then since Taikan's time, Japanese artists coming to India is become kind of a tradition of intent, especially intent. Not probably many other artists, many other institutions send artists to India, but especially this intent, Okakura's intent, Taikan's intent, sent artists constantly, not just Akinofuku, but many other.
To Shantiniketan essentially.
Right. Especially Shantiniketan, because Akinofuku was actually taught in Shantiniketan,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So that's, but other artists too came to here just to observe or create some paintings. But Akinofuku would be very noted.
Oh,
must be
I'm
noted.
sorry, I know we don't have the time.
Yeah, I
we
think
can
we're running out of
continue, but I
time
thought
now,
that,
so,
rather than trying to sum up
Yeah.
what she had very eloquently put into a capsule, this would be an interesting dialogue
Okay.
for the future.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful interacting with you.
Thank you very much for both of you. That was most interesting. And yes, I know, when you talk about Swami Vivekananda, one of the things I recall was reading, because he wrote a lot about his time in Japan. In fact, there are records about Swami Vivekananda's, his time in Japan, which he wrote. He wrote letters and said, young people should be going to Japan. But I think though Okakura Tenshin came to see him, I don't think they met when he came, because he was unwell. And I think then the connection more was with Rabindranath Tagore. But thank you very much. It was a very fascinating session. And now we go on to the third session of this afternoon, which is Japanese contribution in the development of sericulture in India. And here we do have a speaker, Mr. Mukund Kishur, who's come all the way from Bangalore. And he is a seasoned science writer and communicator. He started his career as a researcher and has taught agriculture. Later, he worked as a senior scientist in the Central Silk Board, Ministry of Textiles of the government. He edited a monthly on silk. The discussant, I think, will be joining us through video conferencing, is Dr. Emin Ananta Rahman, a senior scientist with profound knowledge about sericulture industry and worked for almost 3 decades in the statistical office in Karnataka State Sericulture Research and Development Institute. I must just say a couple of things is that, we know of this connection and the role of Jamshedji Tata, also who has a connection with Rabindranath Tagore, Vivekananda, because on a ship in Japan. And some way he was responsible setting up the Indian science later. So these are all who are connected. Recently, I found in 2016 signed an MOU again on cooperation in sericulture. So I think these cycles come back again. And the reason perhaps for this recent one is that India is the second largest consumer of silk in the world. And are you surprised? I mean, all of us in saris, so 6 yards each one of us that we wear. So over to you, Mr. Kishur, please. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Respected dignitaries, distinguished scholars, ladies and gentlemen. As my paper is mainly based on the archival studies, I'm dividing the presentation in 2 parts. One is I'll show you the photos and little I'll try to introduce briefly about the silk sericulture and the people who have helped develop sericulture very quickly through a PPT, and then I talk about the details. Yeah, these are the people starting from, actually in southern India, the sericulture started by Tipu Sultan. He sent emissaries to West Bengal and China to get the seed and other material weaving techniques from Bengal, West Bengal, to get into Karnataka. And Maharaja Mysore and his Diwan, Mr. Purnaya, and J.N. Tata, sir, and Navaratna Ramarao, Sir M. Vishweshwarya, they are the basic people who built, who built the kingdom of sericulture in Karnataka particular and in India general. Silk, as everyone knows, is liked by everyone. The very name itself evokes delicate feelings. Everyone knows about silk. It doesn't need any introduction. Yeah, Indian silk industry, actually, we have got 5 different varieties of silk. And actually, the mulberry, the white one, and the Tassar, Eri silk, and the Muga silk. These are the 4 varieties. And in Tassar, there are 2 kinds of silk. One is tropical, another is. Okay, next. Okay, sericulture, silk has been mentioned long back in Ramayana, and Ramayana has been the oldest, epic available. Actually, there is a sloka in Ramayana which explains Kambalanam cha Mukhyanam Shauma Kotyancharinja Hastasashvaratha Pada Divya Rupam Solankritam. In Valmiki Ramayana, Balakand, 74th Sarga and 5th sloka, meaning Janaka, the father of Sita, while offering the bridal presents, offered best woolen and silken cloths in unlimited quantities, and also well-decorated elephants, horses, chariots, and army. Ramayana period itself is very, 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 very ancient. This proves the fact that in India, silk was in use during Ramayana period itself, much before any other country in the world. Now, this is a painting done by one Mr. Chowdhury. It involves all the activities of all the stories of all the legends of the silk. For example, Siling was the princess who discovered silk. A cocoon fell down in her cup, tea cup, and she extracted the silk. And this is about the what goes mad about silk root. And Mysore Maharaja, who supported development of sericulture. It is Sir M. Vishweshwarya. He was the visionary and chief engineer, and then Diwan of Mysore, who supported sericulture, who nurtured sericulture. With him only, the modern sericulture technology started in Karnataka. Sri Navaratna Rama was one more distinguished person who was an MCS officer, who was the secretary of Sericulture Committee in National Conference, and who nurtured silk. And F.M. Abdul Khaddus and his passion. He was in Channapatna near Bangalore, who was a trader and who nurtured sericulture. Yeah, this is again J.N. Tata. He ranks one of the top position. A Tata silk form was developed by Sir. And he is Mr. Oju, who came from Japan. The story is about him only today. And Sri Diwan of Sheshadri Iyer, who helped sericulture again in Karnataka. And Mr. Oju. This is the Tata silk form, which I'm going to talk about. This is the old building. And these were the activities in Tata silk form. This is the group photo. This is reeling, packing, trading, everything is there. Photos are very rare. And silkworm rearing in Tata silk form, celebrating a cocoon harvest in Tata silk form, silk yarn making in Tata silk form, a group photo of Tata silk form. Yeah, Mr. Appar Dore Madhuliar, who was the first trainer, who was first trained in that form. Diwan of Mysore, Sir Yamuhi, with F.M. Khaddus at Channapatna. He himself was taking interest and supporting sericulture like anything. Mr. Orju is sitting in the center with a garland. Then comes Unimura and Miss Sato. During 1920, they came back to Karnataka and tried to develop sericulture again after Tata's this one. And JICA, that is Japan-India Cooperation, it was in 3 phases, led by Dr. Kawakami for more than a decade. And these are the JICA extension programs. Okay, now I'll go to the main story. Silk, the very name itself evokes delicate feelings. Its exquisite qualities like natural sheen, affinity for dyes, vibrant colors, lightweight, excellent drape have made it the perfect choice of connoisseurs. Till date, no fabric could match its #1 position among textiles. Nobody could snatch it. It remains the unconquered queen, the queen of textiles. But for the efforts of the people who nourished, protected, and helped her to grow, she could not have attained such a glorious position. Behind her great success lie the struggle, toil, and sacrifice hundreds of thousands of people. While emperors, kings, and queens patronized this royal fabric, farmers, weavers, reelers, artists, craftsmen, scientists, technologists, policymakers, administrators worked for her centuries. She mesmerized each and every one. Here I'm going to speak about the contribution of Japan to Indian sericulture. According to Dr. Sushila Narasimhan, dialogues between India and Japan invariably refer to long history of contacts between the two countries dating back to the visit to Japan of Indian Buddhist monk Bodhisena in the 18th century AD. But the transfer of Japanese sericulture practices was from Sri J.N. Tata in the 19th century. Well, among the personalities who helped develop sericulture, Sri J.N. Tata ranks one of the top position, is mainly for two reasons. Firstly, J.N. Tata was the pioneer in building the then traditional sericulture and silk industry on scientific basis. And secondly, during this process, he developed a sericulture firm comprising of a filature and a weaving unit in Basavannagudi area of Bangalore, which was also probably the first training center as far as sericulture is concerned. And the third part is actually, he brought this Japanese couple who were the sericulture experts, Mr. Orju and Mrs. Orju. James Shetty Usurvanji Tata was a great visionary, 1839 to 1904. He was not only a great philanthropist and business magnate, but also one of the greatest visionaries the country has ever seen. Nation builders. Though an extremely busy person, Sri Tata had very interesting hobbies. In his frequent foreign tours, if he came across anything, be it a machinery, be it a plant, be it a fruit or vegetable, he not only used to purchase it, but also try it in India. At the same time, he was careful enough to see that such experiments were never allowed to become too costly. But the only branch he exempted from restriction was silk industry. He knew that sericulture has a great potential to generate employment, especially for the rural populace, and silk had a great demand in the export market. Now, 1 acre of sericulture actually in its value chain provides employment to 13 people. And around 60%, 52 to 60% of the shareholders, the activities done by women. That is why it is a rural employment tool. Very perfect. He had a strong feeling. Tata had a strong feeling that Indian silk industry was not organized in a systematic way. He wanted to do something about it. Therefore, during his foreign tours, he visited sericultural organizations, institutions, held discussions with experts and other related people in countries like Japan, France, and Italy. He observed that unlike India, silk industry was prospering in these countries only because it was built purely on scientific lines. There was sericulture in India, but it was not on scientific lines. Therefore, he decided to re-establish Indian silk industry on a scientific base. A visit to Japan in 1893 impressed him with the scientific development of sericulture in that country. For Tata, Japan was a model. It was mainly because the Japanese had picked the best things from all these countries and advanced in sericulture. For example, the silk egg production system Japan adopted was from France, that is developed by Louis Pasteur, whereas the filature industry was from Italy. The intelligent Japanese had modified these practices and had adopted them to suit their climatic conditions and industry requirements. That is why they were flourishing. They were #1 earlier. Tata silk firm, with his charisma, influence, good office, Sri Tata could convince Sri Sheshadri Iyer, the then Diwan of Mysore, to cooperate in this venture. With the encouragement from the Diwan, Sri Tata established a firm encompassing a granage and a small filature. Granage is egg production center, okay? Filature is reeling center, reeling factory like. Silk filature in Basavannagudi area, Bangalore in 1896. According to one of his earlier biographers, he spent rupees 50,000 on the project. Harris in 1925 says it. It was a very big amount in those days. On a visit in 1897, Tata selected the land for the mulberry plantation and a rearing house, and subsequently obtained a rent-free grant and an annual subsidy of ₹3,000 for the then Mysore government. VAT in 98 and both Tucker in 1912 have noted it. It was the industry's potential value for the country and these poorer classes in particular, rather than any prospect of his own personal advantage, that motivated Tata. He provided all the necessary infrastructure and facilities. Everything was done in the Japan model, and few locals were trained in mulberry cultivation, silkworm rearing, seed production, preservation of cocoons, reeling and hank making, etc. Tata hired the Japanese couple as sericulture expert to run the farm. The husband, Mr. Orju, called as the expert, recruited for him as an interpreter, a Japanese servant of his cousin R.D. Tata, who already spoke some English and Hindustani. Harris records in 1925. Mr. Orju arrived in 1898 and was soon traveling from Bangalore to the much famed silk trader, Mr. Mastan's base at Chennapatna, to inspect the mulberry gardens, the rearing and the reeling. He settled at the silk farm in Bangalore and started an experiment with the rearing of worms, first from seed cocoons obtained from Ramanagaram near Bangalore, the cloth-plate breed is called, and then with others from Chennapatna, reared by Japanese method. Everything was Japanese method. Mulberry leaves were also needed to feed the worms until they could be supplied from new plantations in the Lalbagh Botanical Gardens in Bangalore or from their own plantation. In the meantime, obtaining the leaves from Ramanagaram is quite nearby to Bangalore, from Ramanagaram proved practical. A contractor put a packet of them on the train to Bangalore each evening. Reeling was more significant. Reeling means taking these cocoons and reeling out the thread. Reeling was more significant then that mulberry growing or rearing, and Mastan, the trader, was soon encouraging Orju to experiment with reeling himself. A filature of 10 basin was constructed. The machinery again imported from Japan. Everything was done upon the Japanese model. Supervision of Mrs. and Mr. Orju. Under the supervision of Mr. Orju, the farm very soon achieved rapid progress. While it became a center of attraction for the common people, it was a pilgrimage for the sericulturists and silk industry people. Sericulturists in and around Bangalore started buying silkworm eggs from the farm. The demand was so much that many times it was not possible to meet it. And it was the first sericulture training institute. Famed as Tata Silk Farm, it was the first sericulture training center also. His farm demonstrated Japanese methods and teaching the locals free of cost for 3 months. They were to study as well as to do mulberry cultivation and conduct silkworm rearing. The possibility of improving the variety by crossbreeding, the detection of disease by means of the microscope, the preservation of cocoons for seed and for silk, the handling of the thread, its packaging, its preparation for the market, everything was done according to the records of Harris in 1925. Happy with the farm's achievements, because of Orju, Sri Tata planned to develop it into a full-fledged organization in a big way in 1899. However, he could not get further support from the Mysore government. The silk samples from the farm were sent to European experts who declared it best. Encouraged by the reports, the government of India established a number of farms on Tata model. Orju's contribution in all such activities was maximum. Tata's silk farm flourished for almost 18 years, thanks to the dedicated hard work of Mr. Orju. Tata died in 1904. By 1906, the Mysore government was again showing a more active interest in the industry. It took advantage of the farm to provide training, records Shamarao in 1936. And 2 years later, there were 8 schoolmasters who had trained in sericulture there and were ready to take up teaching it in schools in different schools across the state. At the same time, Orju, the Japanese expert in charge, was commissioned to visit rearing centers across the state to advise on the proper selection of silkworm seed. There were also efforts to introduce new mulberry and better methods of cultivation. After Tata, he has handed over the farm to the Salvation Army. In the beginning, with the new owners also, the farm greatly developed. But unfortunately, in the later part, the Salvation Army authorities failed to understand the plans of Tata. They terminated the service of Mr. and Mrs. Orju, and the supervision of the farm was handed over to the officers who did not have any exposure to sericulture. And naturally, the farm started seeing the bad days. They converted these buildings to accommodate their automatic fly shuttle looms, to create employment for the inmates of the orphanage run by Salvation Army. And mulberry plantation was used to grow grow the mulberry fruits for jams and jelly. Within a couple of years, the mulberry bushes grown in 13 acres of once flourishing lush green farm were uprooted. The authorities grew cereals like ragi, bajra, and pulses like avare to feed the inmates of the orphanage. But none of their efforts succeeded. Fed up with all this, they closed down the farm once for all. Thus, the dreams of J.N. Tata to convert this farm into a big organization of international repute to serve the needy, especially the poor, came to an unfortunate end. Gradually, the entire 20-acre farm got converted into a modern extension area of Basungudi in Bangalore. Ultra-modern bungalows and cottages have sprung up in that old farm. What is remaining today is only a road divider, which indicates the area's Tata Silkworm colony. I'm sorry. I live nearby Tedia. Whenever I see that, bungalows and I feel, I go emotional. What a noble thought, and what a the impact, though the farm has gone, it had created a great impact on the Indian silk industry. The impetus thus given to the silk industry in India, writes Commissioner Mr. Booth Tucker, the name of the man who launched the enterprise will be held in grateful remembrance by those who will have been benefited by his forethoughts and labors. And more importantly, the veterans like Sri Appadurai Mudaliar and Lakshmana Rao, who got trained in the Tata silk farm, made Indian sericulture and silk industry prosper in the last years. Again, Japan comes into picture. In 1999, government hired the services of another Japanese expert, Mr. Yonimura. The silk expert from Japan was now engaged for general development of the silk industry and was also entrusted with the control of all research and experimental work in the state. A lady expert from Japan, Ms. Sato, was also engaged for the introduction of foot reeling as a home industry. Graduates were recruited and trained under the expert. The hybrid layings prepared were distributed among the sericulturists. This was the first revolutionary step in the history of sericulture. He gave the idea of establishment of an isolated seed area for propagating the pure Mysore race and to rear and protect the exotic races from Europe. Sericulture literature also they have got a hand. Based on his field experiences and experiments, Yonimura wrote Handbook of Practical Sericulture with Sri Navaratna Ramarao. The book dealt with the sericulture technology and package of practices. Then comes the World Bank project. Here I have to mention a legendary IAS officer who is still working for sericulture after retirement also, Sri V. Balasubramanian. He is called a magician of the silk industry. He revolutionized Indian silk industry. Yeah, now comes the World Bank project during 1980s. Dr. Ujigawa and his colleagues, the others include Dr. Miyashita, mulberry expert, Dr. Yan Ujiawa, silkworm breeding expert, Dr. Nishimura, silkworm rearing, Dr. Kawakita, silkworm pathology. These people assisted their Indian counterparts in the R&D programs in India. From again 1991 to 1997, Japan International Cooperation Agency (JICA) revolutionized Indian silk industry by introducing and popularizing Bivoltin silk through various programs in 3 phases. Under the leadership of Dr. Kawakami, who still lives in Japan. We are still in contact with those people. The Central Silk Board under JICA, Central Silk Board scientists were able to evolve high productive Bivoltin hybrids. Bivoltin is the white silk. It is very popular. CSR hybrids, mulberry cultivation package, and Bivoltin silkworm layering package. And the impact of the project includes JICA programs provided that the Bivoltin could be successfully reared in Indian conditions by farmers. It was the confidence that they gave us. The technologies developed under JICA projects are suitable and sustainable for promotion of Bivoltin in India. The farmers have become competent enough to adopt the new technologies and are able to harvest 70 kg of quality cocoons per 100 EFLs and quality silk of 2A, 4A. These are the best grades in silk, grade silk. The trained manpower generated under the project are providing necessary technology support to the farmers for successful Bivoltin promotion even today. And their programs are, number of programs are go on increasing. We have been in association with them only. In Toto, JICA has made a silk revolution in India. There is a famous kirtana in Telugu, Yandaru Mahanubhavalu, Andareniki Vandanamalu. That means there are so many great people. My salutations to all of them. It is high time that we should remember all these great people who have contributed directly or indirectly towards the development of today's flourishing Indian silk industry. I am thankful to Kizuna India-Japan Study Forum for this opportunity. My special thanks to Professor Sushila Narasimhan, Dr. Ashok Jain, and all others connected, and all of you. Thank you so much. Because of you, I could remember all these incidences and the people, personalities who helped develop. Thank you so much, everyone. Sarve bhavantu sukhinam, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani paschantu, ma katsit dukkha bhag bhavet. May all be happy, may all be healthy, may all have good things, may none have misery. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was such a wonderful talk. And to think of this cooperation which continues till today in this very, very important sector. Thank you. We've really enjoyed that talk. I'd now invite Dr. Ananta Rahman to join us. I think he'll be joining us online. He's the discussant, and we look forward to the conversation between the two of you. Over to you, sir. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. No, I'm so glad we were able to hear you, and it's been very, very interesting to hear from you this cooperation over time, which has helped the sericulture industry in India. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So that, I think, brings us to the end of this, at least the three presentations. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
We really enjoyed your presentation.
Any questions?
Yes. Are there any questions, please? Because he's still, if you want to ask any questions to Mr. Kishore.
Yes.
Why do we know so much about the Chinese silk in India
Uh-huh.
in the 50s, but nothing about Japanese having?
No. Japan were actually topping earlier. Then came China. Now China is also reducing gradually. Now Japan production has gone down drastically because of industrialization and pressure on land and labor. That's the main thing. In China, same thing is happening.
Yeah.
Wherever industry grows, sericulture activities come down. It has an impact on agriculture and sericulture. So industrialization has a negative impact also. So we have to balance that. That is why now China is also reducing.
Well, actually, we hear so much more about China nowadays. I think they've overtaken the rest of the world. As you say, to begin with, they were nowhere, but that seems to be the story everywhere. But with this new agreement that we have, hopefully, I mean, the purpose of this is that we actually are able to revitalize our silk industry, because there is a huge market here, as we know, and a growing market. And unfortunately, we continue to import, and we unfortunately continue to import a lot from China. So I think it really pains me a lot to know that our Mysore silks have got, are actually with silk from China, but that's a part.
But there is a control over it, and we are producing more. We are producing quality silk in the world. Now we are number 2, ma'am. Now we are next only to China, and our production of quality silk has gone up because of the efforts of so many people, including administrators, policymakers, farmers, and all. As I said, it's practically coming up now.
So very, very happy to hear that. I hope that trend continues.
Thank
So,
you,
sir,
ma'am.
if you may, thank you very much. Another hand of applause, please, for him. That really brings us to the end of this session. It's the first inaugural session of the Kizuna study group. It was very interesting because for me sitting here, we look at 3 completely different subjects. I mean, first was the first shipping link. And then, of course, the cultural exchanges much later, beginning of the 20th century. And then Japanese contribution to the development of sericulture. But I see a thread running through it. And I think the thread really is that, these contacts, I mean, the contacts by sea that were there, they continued over time. And when we talk about, in fact, even the sericulture link and Mr. Tata, he's the one who started this shipping line called NYK. I mean, he actually got into a collaboration with NYK, which was, challenge the British monopoly that was there. So very many times, I think in history, we were looking at Japan as an alternate in a way to the European colonial powers, whether it was in terms of art, whether it was in terms of, I think, shipping routes, and now as we hear about sericulture. I'm quite happy to, to ask whether there are any questions you have to the two organizers, and that we're looking forward to many more sessions. We have another one coming up next month. Maybe you could tell us what it's going to be about, Ashokji.
Can I use this mic? I can use this. In fact, I see in the audience few people who probably I would request to comment. One is Archana Shastri ji. The reason is that I still believe that exchanges in craft is a living tradition. We still have lots of handicrafts. When you talk of employment, huge number of people are engaged in our handloom sector and so on. And I think there is some way, and also very strongly feel that it's such collaborations which bring two people culture together, understanding together. And I suppose Archana ji would like to comment because you have looked at this issue.
I've actually been looking at a whole range of kind of environmental resources, which one has been sort of, we have a vast variety in India particularly. And in terms of, techniques and all, I mean, there is something which a lot can be imbibed and shared, from Japan. And it is something, and also this whole kind of culture of thrift, which comes from their kind of, textiles, the use of borrow textiles, in terms of recycle, reuse, repurpose. I mean, it is something which is very embedded in India also. And being a large country and a mosaic of so many cultures and subcultures, we have the advantage of having so many kind of indigenous varieties. But in a sense, they're very similar to, the intimate connection they have with textiles when it comes to kind of patching up old textiles and putting it to sort of multiple usages. So that is one large area which would be very, very of a great interest, and hopefully, I mean, I'd love to work on that.
Thank you. I think, yes, please.
I was just wondering regarding the reference of the priests Jesuit priests going to Goa to get the clarification on the various issues regarding social life. Has a lot to do with the fact that the Portuguese just wanted very much to set up a forum in South Asia for uniform civil code. They tried to do that in Goa, but they were not very, very successful in Indonesia and Japan. And well, it's a fascinating aspect that I learned that Jesuit priests kept going, but are they still doing that? I have no idea. I would like to know that.
Professor Costa would like to answer.
Yes. But I'm sorry, I didn't understand exactly the question.
My question is, do you have a uniform civil code in Japan?
No, not at all, not at all. No.
So I think that really brings us to the end of this session. And thank you all for being here. It was extremely interesting for me. It always is. I mean, you feel you know a lot, and then you pick up so many gems as you hear, and and it's always, I think it's exciting for people who love Japan, and for people who find India-Japan relations, the importance of India-Japan relations, to be able to learn more and to be able to spread this information about this very, very special relationship. So I thank all of you. Thank Sushila ji. Sushila ji, really, it's quite amazing. She wasn't too well. And through all this, we were really worried whether she'd be able to join us today, but she's been here, and I really think she requires a round of applause for what all she's done. And this is just dedication, really. And of course, Dr. Jain. We also have another colleague who couldn't come today, I think, because she fell unwell, and I think we should mention her. And this is Gitanjali Sinha Roy, who unfortunately got, I think, COVID and just about a couple of days ago. So all this has been put together despite everything. People have come from far away, and I'm so glad that we could hold it. And look forward to the rest of the lectures in this series as we go on. Thank you once. Thank you once again. Thank you very much.
To say something about the way forward.
Right, the way forward, I think the way forward really is that we already have, I think the kind of subjects that we have are so vast. What we need to do is really get people to be able to identify people and then, be able to bring them here. The issue really, I think, is that it worries me a bit when I think of the network that is there and the network that, Sushila ji and Ashok ji have. I'm very worried about losing this network because you've been able to get so many people. 20 scholars have already volunteered to be there at the conference. So all of you who worked in Japan, I think I would really request all of you to be able to reach out to people and everyone who's here. So to be able to, establish this network. And I think that is a way forward. Really, there is very little scholarship. I mean, as I compared to other countries, very little, at least for me, little scholarship on the historical aspects of India-Japan relations. And this is a story that awaits to be told. And all of us who are, I think, believe in this and committed to this relationship should do everything possible to make sure this happens. And we have here a representative of the embassy and also of the Japan Foundation. We really look forward to, to your support in this. And on my, on my part, I will try to do whatever I can to get at least institutions like the ICCR, with whom I have been involved, to see whether we can get them on board also. Thank you. Yeah.
I think I should have mentioned that one of the reasons of setting up these monthly lectures is that we want students who are working on PhD topics on the historical aspects of India-Japan relations. We wanted to provide them a forum so that international audience would come to know what they are doing. Because there is usually what happens is, I mean, all of us who have been in research is that while doing research, unless you have published, unless your book has come out, people don't come to know you. But with internet facility now, I think I would very much like this platform of Kizuna Forum to be used for young people to come up with whatever they think they are doing, even MPhil level. And that message, only the academic community here can spread, because so I would request all of you in your departments and university to somehow encourage people that, look, don't worry, you don't have to wait for a final paper. Whatever you are thinking, here is a forum. So I think the spread has to come. I think this is some point which this forum would very much like to be used for. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think what we have to do also is disseminate more information about this forum. So I think we'll start from here now and just make sure that everybody who uses social media or whatever it is, talk more about this. So thank you again, everybody. Thank you.
So let me conclude the session.
Yes.
On behalf of Musai, I congratulate all the 6 speakers for their very lucid and wonderful presentations. The deliberations that followed indicate how the establishment of direct maritime linkage between India and Japan by the Portuguese in mid-16th century bridged the geographical distance and facilitated movement of people, goods, culture, and ideas. More importantly, it created an increasing mutual awareness and curiosity, which in the years to come inspired painters, intellectuals, and businessmen to undertake sea voyages to know the country and the people, share and exchange knowledge, and learn from each other, be it in the field of art, culture, or sericulture. We are indeed very grateful to all of them, particularly our 2 international scholars, for braving all travel hassles. We wish to record our deep appreciation to the Japan Foundation for the necessary funds to facilitate air travel to our national and international speakers. It was indeed very gracious of Ms. Yuka Hayakawa and Ms. Anushri Datta to receive the guests and escort them from airport to IIC. Thank you very much, Yuka-san and Anushri. I don't know whether they are here. Okay. I thank all the distinguished guests and the audience, both online and offline, for their interest and enthusiasm and sparing time to attend inaugural event. And a very hearty thanks to Ambassador Deepa Gopalan Vada, without whom we can't do anything. We have received accolades for the beautiful brochure and the banner. The credit for this goes to Ms. Shuka Jain. Are you here? Thank you very much, Shuka, for the beautiful designing. I have no words to thank Dr. Ashok Jain for micromanaging the entire event so efficiently and meticulously, at times almost single-handedly. Working with him has always been a source of joy and a great learning experience for me. Thank you very much, Dr. Jain. It would be remiss if I did not acknowledge Professor Sushma Jain's contribution behind the scene. Thank you very much, Sushma ji, for your wholehearted support. Last but not the least, today's event would not have been possible without the logistic support of our dynamic team comprising of Mr. Manoj Sharma, Anjali Sinha Roy, who could not come here, Ms. Sankte Taku, and Mr. Pandey. Thank you all once again. And now let us meet and have informal interaction over a cup of tea. And please do not forget to visit the exhibition, Japan photo exhibition, Japan from India's perspective. Thank you very much.
It's upstairs.
It's upstairs.
Yes, it's really good.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.